keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. Ooh, oh, you see I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You see I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong. You see I am yours, and I believe. What do you say of me? The only thing that matters now is everything you think of me. In you I find my worth, in you I find my true identity. Oh, you see I am loved when I can't feel a thing, and you see I am strong when I think I am weak, and you see I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong. You see I am yours, and I believe. What do you say of me? Taking all I have right now, I'm laying it at your feet. You'll have every failure, God. You'll have every victory. Ooh, oh, you see I am loved when I can't feel a thing, and you see I am strong when I think I am weak, and you see I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong. You see I am yours, and I believe. What do you say of me? I believe what you say of me.
Wow. Favorite song by favorite singer. What a great way to start this day, at least this service. Good morning to you, my dears. Good morning. Today's talk is the Tao of Freedom, and I thought that I would be talking about the Tao Te Ching because I like it, and you might wonder why. What I love is a different perspective of something that I believe in. And I believe that there's something in the universe greater than myself and that it works through people. And that's been believed by many other spiritual luminaries. And it's good to see their perspective because it means I get a different view of what I believe in. I saw a cartoon, I'm not sure where I saw it, but it was two different individuals looking at a 6, or was it a 9? One person said, no, it's a 9, and the other person said, no, it's a 6. And it was the same thing from a different perspective. And then there was me looking at both of them going, you're both idiots. I know. But you know that how that is. It's like we all have our own perspective, and it's the one. And so sometimes to study a different religion allows us to see just a different characteristic of that one. It's almost like meeting the family of your significant other for the first time. Because you think you know them, and then they'll show you a whole different perspective of that one. Like sometimes it's eye-opening. But it's all the one. It's that one person, and it's this one thing. And today I was going to talk about the Tao because I really like that teaching. I love it. I love this part. The Tao cannot be defined because it applies to everything. You cannot define something in terms of itself. If you can define a principle, it's not the Tao. I love that. The Tao cannot be defined, but it can be known, and its method is meditation. So perhaps the man that sees a 9 can't define it as just a 9, and the man or woman that sees it as a 6 can't define it as a 6, and yet they can know it as a 9 or know it as a 6. We can have an experience of this which is so much greater than ourselves. But even that is just a small segment of what it is. But it's not, I shouldn't say it's worth the effort. It's worth the effort. So I was going to use that as my teaching. Plus, I love this part. It's so significant, I think. I think this is really good information for today, because before the first service and in between services, Beverly and Stephanie Ann and I have had good discussions about what to do. How do we contribute to a world that works for more people? How do we contribute to a world that works? How do we contribute to a world where everybody has an opportunity to thrive? Franklin Delano Roosevelt said we should be free of there were 4 freedoms: the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom from want, and the freedom from fear for the world. I mean, I could make a stand for those kind of freedoms. And how do we allow those freedoms to operate in our world, in this world? And so we've had this wonderful conversation, and I'm learning a lot, and then I can be so freaking overwhelmed. And so the Tao would say it this way. It's called the ripple effect. Do you want to be a positive influence in the world? Well, first, get your own life in order. Ground yourself in this single principle so that your behavior is wholesome and effective. If you do that, you will earn respect and be a powerful influence. Your behavior influences others through a ripple effect. A ripple effect works because everyone is influenced by everyone else. Powerful people have powerful influences. And I guess I do want to not only just take a stand, but also be an influence for good in the world, but that means I need to own that I can be an influencer. Because, see, I love that song. You know, I say that I can say I'm out of touch, and I can say that I don't know what to do, and I can say I'm ignorant, and I can say, who am I anyway? And God says, well, you don't even know who you are yet, because you haven't listened to who I think you are, which is what today's talk turned out to be. I was looking through my library last night, and while I was looking for all the books I have on the Tao, I found this, which is the Fourfold Way, Walking the Paths of the Warrior, Teacher, Healer, and Visionary by Angelina Ariane. She has a PhD in cultural anthropology, and has studied indigenous peoples and the commonalities. Sort of like Ernest Holmes, our founder, looked for the commonalities in various religions. She looked for the commonalities in different myths and stories and shamanic traditions to see what was common about those. And then what she drew from that is that they are teaching particular archetypes. And an archetype is a pattern that is held within the collective consciousness. Emerson would call it the oversoul. Ernest Holmes would call it race consciousness. It's patterns or energies or vibrations that we can draw from and then live out of, and we can make what is potential actual. We're the one that has to make a potentiality an actuality. That's what humankind can do. We can actualize a potential. And archetypes are a potential that live in the collective consciousness that we all live in and share. Now, let me tell you a little bit about collective consciousness for those of you that sort of know it. We've all gone places and felt the consciousness of a place. Sometimes you can go into a place and it feels eerie. And maybe 80 out of 100 of people will say it feels eerie. 20 won't know, but there will be a feeling to it. When I first took my first trip to not Las Vegas, but New Orleans, I landed and I felt it. I felt the energy of New Orleans, and I flew in from Salt Lake City. The energy in New Orleans was different than the energy in Salt Lake City. It was palpable. Just by landing, I wanted a drink. I was like, I bet I could have a drink. And I didn't even drink. There was just something so very there was a race consciousness about it. Let me tell you about the power of that race consciousness. It's not just a feeling. It's not just an influence. There's actual power and instruction in it. A man named Rupert Sheldrake, who was a chemical biologist, a professor in chemical biology actually, wanted to explain what we call instinct. Animals have instincts. People talk about instincts. If you study animal behavior, they have certain instincts. There's an instinct to do this. There's an instinct to do that. There's an instinct for certain birds to fly south in the winter and north in the summer. There's an instinct for certain butterflies to land at a certain place at a certain time. How do they do that? They have no watches. Where's this instinct come from? And people were telling him, well, it has to be in the DNA. He said, no. These chemicals, there's nothing in these chemicals that can explain why a bird would fly south. There's nothing in these chemicals that would explain why certain birds have 2 broods a season. There's nothing in these chemicals that explain that an animal knows how to do this thing because nobody taught them to do this thing. And I will use the best example I can because I talk about it all the time. And I talked about it first service, and I realized I haven't seen these birds this year. But there's a particular bird, they're called cowbirds, and they land on cows, and they have a symbiotic relationship that the cows love the birds, and the birds will actually just not follow. They will land on the cows and stay on them all day long, eating the bugs and the flies that come after the cows. The cows love them. At least they look like they love them because they got 6 of them on them. And it's normal, except for this year, that my horses would have those birds on their back while they're out in the field. Not this year. I got to think about that. But there's something very interesting about cowbirds, and I've talked about it before, but it just boggles my mind, and it proves that there's an intelligence in what Rupert Sheldrake described as a morphogenic field, a field of information that every species buys into just by right of being that species. Therefore, being human beings, that we will buy into one also. But let's just talk about this morphogenic field that the cowbirds buy into. Now, the cowbird, it just didn't think it should raise its own young. It was probably that God wants the species to continue, and it propagates, and it creates eggs, but it doesn't feel called to raise the eggs. It just doesn't have a mother-father instinct. So it will lay its eggs in another bird's nest. What a surprise. So if it has 4 eggs, it will lay them in 4 different nests, and sometimes it'll lay it in a robin's nest or a raven's nest or a crow's nest. Any nest it can find, it will lay the eggs there. And the mother bird who comes in does have the mothering instinct, and she says, my goodness, that's a big egg. But I'm going to lay on it anyway, and I'm going to raise whatever catches. And they do. And then those cowbirds, who have never seen another cowbird, will grow up, land on cows or horses, find another cowbird, and then go lay their eggs somewhere else. See, they describe it as instinct, but as Rupert Sheldrake would say, there is no chemical combination in the DNA to have the parents abandon their eggs. But it's in the morphogenic field, the field of information that influences those particular birds, that influences birds to fly south, and influences birds to fly north, or influences certain animals to do certain things at certain times. And there's a morphogenetic field for human beings. We call it the collective consciousness. And in that collective consciousness, there are archetypes of possibilities that can empower the human being. But we have to choose to let that archetype work through us. See, we are the species with choice. We are the species with free will. We can have instincts, but we can go beyond instincts, and we can tap into instincts if we choose. And I think all of the people that we would say were history makers somehow tapped into one of these archetypes, or perhaps all of them. And because of that, they had what we would call supernatural or beyond the ordinary personalities, charisma, power, abilities. But they're available to all of us, so I want to share them with you. They are the archetypes of the warrior, the teacher, the healer, and the visionary. The warrior, the teacher, the healer, the visionary. I'm going to talk to you about these, not necessarily in that order. But let's start with warrior. The warrior is an archetype of empowerment. Not power over, but empowerment. The warrior is not warlike. The warrior, instead, is about the ability to show up and be present in an honorable and respectful way. To show up and be present in an honorable and a respectful way. Historically, the warrior has shown up as leaders, protectors, adventurers, and explorers. They did not back away from discussion. They did not back away from conflict. They did not back away from what was messy. They showed up, they were present, not to fight, but to be honorable and respectful. A modern-day warrior might be Eleanor Roosevelt. A modern-day warrior might be Martin Luther King. Many of the early civil rights leaders, because they showed up, they were present, but they made sure that they weren't warlike in the way that they showed up. Now, nature has a tendency to support any archetype. Nature supports archetypes. And there's a way for each archetype to be made more real in us, to be strengthened in us through nature. And the way that we can strengthen the archetype of the warrior is by allowing ourselves to communicate and commune and to be influenced by trees. I know I was, but it's true. Angelina talks about this. I've read about that. In some of the workshops I do, I ask people to go out and commune with trees, but there's actually another aspect of that, and that is that you can be strengthened by the strength of the tree. In this particular area, the indigenous people of the Northwest, when they would go from place to place, a lot of it was through running, and when they would run and run out of energy, they would go up against certain trees and allow the tree to give them the energy that they needed. It's like they got their own latte or espresso so that they could be energized and move forward. I'd heard about that, but I also heard about it again when I met Tim Lorenzo, my husband, because he talked about a very hard time in his life, and to handle what was going on and to just get rid of the anxiety of it, he would run to become more peaceful. He would run to become more centered. And so he would run this loop, and about halfway through the loop, he would be tired and worn out, and there was a certain tree that he would have right about the halfway point, and he'd go up against the tree and stay there for about 5 minutes, and he was good to go for the rest of the way. Trees can strengthen the warrior archetype within us. And there's a pose for each one of these archetypes. And the pose for the warrior is the standing pose, with your feet shoulder width apart, straight, chin level, hand here, breathe. Standing pose. Now, I know some of you do yoga, and there's a yoga pose for the warrior, but this is from the indigenous people of North America. The other archetype that we might want to tap into is the archetype of the healer. You know, the Hippocratic Oath said, whatever house I enter, I shall come to heal. And Ernest Holmes, in one of his very first meditations at the back of the Science of Mind textbook says, and I'm paraphrasing, but it starts out with, "Come and I will heal you, for it is not myself, but the power of God that heals through me." So the archetype of the healer doesn't mean that you heal, but you become a vessel through which the universe reveals wholeness. And the healers are called to pay attention to what has heart and meaning, to stay open to what has heart and meaning. And in so doing, they heal because they allow themselves to be a vehicle of love. They heal through the power of love. And love acknowledges, accepts, recognizes, validates, and is filled with gratitude. Love acknowledges, accepts, recognizes, validates, and has lots of gratitude. A modern-day healer might be Mother Teresa or Nelson Mandela. When I think about being in prison for 24 years and coming out and still being able to be part of the truth and reconciliation process and bring healing to his country, whoa, that was a power greater than himself. He was definitely allowing the archetype of the healer to move through him. Because the focus will always be on how much can I love and how can love heal through me. There's a pose for the healer, and the pose is to lay down to lay flat on your back, to lay like this. And the part of nature that empowers the healer, just as the trees empower the warrior, The earth empowers the healer. The earth is alive, brothers and sisters. I'm so grateful that I have a lot of lawn. And I have lawn in the sun, and I have lawn in the shade. And a couple of weeks ago, it was a hot day, and I was overwhelmed. A lot of stuff was going on. And I found a spot, and I laid down, and I just sunk into the earth. And the dog was on one side, and the cat was on the other, and they thought, oh, we're in heaven. But I was in heaven, because there's something about the earth. The earth, in 45 minutes, took so much away from me, cleansed me. It was the best talk therapy I'd ever had, only I didn't talk. I just laid there and let the earth do her work. There's so much from indigenous cultures that say that Pachamama, or whatever you want to call it, cares for its creation, including its children, which are us. It's humans. But we have to let the earth touch us. Because the earth is here to heal us. The next archetype is the visionary. And the visionary's job is to make truth visible, telling the truth without blame or judgment. There's something I heard a long time ago that truth without love is a weapon, but love without truth is just sentimentality. It has no power. So you put truth with love, and something wonderful can happen. So when you're telling the truth without blame or judgment, you're allowing yourself to know that you're doing this because you have a purpose. A visionary has a purpose. They tell the truth with purpose. How many of you have just had people tell you the truth, but it's like, for what purpose are you telling me this? And when you want to go blurting the truth out, for what purpose? What does this move forward? A visionary always has a purpose. They are authentic, they're truthful, and they honor their own intuition and their own insights and their own vision. They honor what's coming to them. They honor what they're doing because they know what their purpose is. A modern day visionary would be someone like Gandhi. The indigenous people teach that each one of us has our own medicine. We have, by that, I guess we would say, if I was going to use my terminology, our own gifts, our own skills. What is ours to give? And that we must own our medicine and share our medicine for the good of all. The gift must be given. The meditative practice for the visionary is to walk. To just walk. To just walk. There was a time I lived on Queen Anne and, Queen Anne Hill, north end of Queen Anne Hill. And below me was the college, and there was a track, and I would walk down to the track, and I'd start walking the track on a Saturday night. And I would say to myself, I'm going to walk the track until I know what I'm supposed to talk about. And I would just walk and walk until something would sort of come to me, and I'd like, oh, I got it. I mean, that's when I had the revelation of what love is. That's when I've had so many revelations. Like, it's like I'm not sure it's the truth, but it's my truth. The truth that set me free. Just by walking. If you need clarity, walk. If you need direction, walk. Just walk. The meditative practice is walking. And the way of using nature to help support this archetype is by having a vision quest. A vision quest is going someplace, sitting, and allowing what comes to you to come to you. We're not doing it this year because of, this thing called the pandemic. But when we had programs for our young adults called the Coming of Age, they would have a vision quest over the weekend. And they would go someplace, and that's where they would stay through the night, through the day, and they would see what would come to them. What animal, what thought, what idea. Some people had animals show up. Some people, whether they were real or imaginary, some people had ancestors show up. You just see what shows up. The way of the visionary is, I'm waiting to see what will show up, what will inspire me. I'm waiting for a greater vision so that I can hold that vision, describe that vision, and speak the truth about that vision. A vision quest. The way things are right now, a lot of our campgrounds are crowded, and maybe you can't get away for a weekend. But maybe you can go to a park like Discovery Park or someplace else, find a little niche to yourself, and sit there and see what comes to you. To activate, to empower, and to live out of that archetype of the visionary. The last archetype is the archetype of the teacher. They are open to outcomes and not attached to outcomes. Now listen to this. They're open to outcomes and not attached to outcomes. They have wisdom and they teach trust. And they understand detachment. Now, detachment in spiritual people, kind people, loving people, churchy people, can sound very cold and uncaring, but it really means that we are able to observe and react in a beneficial way because we're not attached to the way must be, which, by the way, is the way of the way. The Tao Te Ching is the way of change, and the way of change is to just see how it changes, which is perfect because Harris and Owen came up with this explanation of what it is to be spiritually aware. This is what it is, his explanation of how it is to be spiritually aware. A spiritually aware person says, whoever is present are the right people to be here. So whoever's watching this, you're the right people to watch this. If this room was filled or not filled, I'd say whoever is here, they're the right people to be here. Whenever we start is the right time to start, except when we're doing this. Because people look for us at a certain time. But some of you want to start a project. When can I start a project? When should I start a project? When should I look into this? When should I start that? Whenever you start will be the right time. Whatever happens is the only thing that could happen. And whenever it's over, it's over. This is all about acceptance, not resignation. Now, the meditative practice for the teacher is to sit, to just sit. There's a prose that I talked about, 2 or 3 years ago, and it was because we had just moved to the Mountaineers, and I talked about the mountain pose. I love the mountain pose. The mountain pose is not so much how you sit, but the way you sit. And you sit as though you are the mountain. And we're so lucky to have Mount Rainier here. And north we have Mount Baker. It's just, you sit as though you are the mountain. And you know what happens with the mountain? Weather. In fact, the mountain creates its own weather. And the weather's the weather. And the mountain is the mountain. So in the midst of chaos and opinion and what's going on and circling around and do they like me? Do they not like me? Did I say the right thing? Did I say it wrong? You're on the mountain. You just sit. And the way of nature that inspires and empowers this archetype is the nature of our own ancestors. We listen to the wisdom that has already been discovered, and we let it in our sitting inform us. The way of the ancestors. We cultivate silence. And we let something speak. I'm not as good at this as my husband is. Tim is, I think he's a mechanical genius. He has fixed things that people said you can't fix. I mean, other men have told him, you can't fix this. This is impossible. He has a John Deere tractor made in 1944. And people have said there are no more parts and you can't fix this. And Tim just looks at it and he says, well, I got to fix it because it's in my nature. And you know what he does? He talks to his daddy, who is also a fixer. And he talks to him and he'll go around and he'll say, you know, Pappy, I don't know how this could be put together. There's got to be something that we could jerry-rig to get this. What do you think? Now, he doesn't hear a voice, but he'll wake up the next morning and know what to do. And he believes it's his pappy giving him instructions while he sleeps. There are times that I hear my papa's voice. Not a lot, but usually having to do with animals because that was my grandfather's thing. And so sometimes I'll be doing something and I'll almost hear like, I don't do it that way. See, if life is eternal and love is immortal, why wouldn't those who loved us still be involved with us, teaching us so that we could teach others? See, a great teacher must be a listening student. What I realize with all of this is that it's important for us because right now we're being called to be in the world. We're being called to be an influence, whether it's encouraging people who don't want to wear a mask or speaking to our friends and saying, you know, I love you, I bless you, but I can't be near you right now because we got to keep six feet away. Or it could be that we're being called to be part of an awakening to racial injustices that have been going on for a very long time. And we're being called to be a part of a solution. We're all being called to be a part of an evolving idea that includes everyone's well-being, because that's the only way God can function. That's a principle. Now, people may not function that way, but God's got to function that way, because if God doesn't function that way, then I don't want God. And it's not the God that speaks to me. But I can't show up as Kathianne Lewis in her little limited self. Instead, God said, look at these archetypes. Look at these. You can be strong. You can stand up. Look at this. You can be a healer. Look at this. You can have a vision. Look at this. You can teach others. Look at this. All of these are available to you. Step into them. In fact, if you are willing, which one of these archetypes are you being called to make part of your personality right now? See them here, and step into them. Just step into them and start to feel the energy. And then do the meditative practice and call upon nature to strengthen you. And if you got all those together, if you want to combine all of those, there's another archetype. And that's the archetype of the Christ, where God made manifest itself through a human vessel. Guess what? It wasn't about Jesus. It's about us. See, spirituality is not about glossing over shit. It's about taking shit and transforming shit into something different. We do it all the time at the ranchette. Great fertilizer. We're not to pretend it's not happening. We're not here to give up and just sing songs. No. We're here to be used by God to be a force for good in the world. And we have the tools, we have the archetypes to step into, but we've got to be willing to rise up in those archetypes and let those rise up in us over and over and over again, because that's what the Christ is. The Christ is us allowing ourselves to be what God is calling us to be and letting us rise up in that power as that power rises up in us. And we've got to do it over and over and over again. Not just today, not just on Sundays. And we're going to fall down, we're going to get up again. You know, the reason that I was there on the ground a couple of Wednesdays ago was because I felt like I fell so far. I was so disappointed in myself. I knew where I could be and I knew I wasn't there. And the earth said, oh, honey, my beloved. One thing I love about being a spiritual community is that we're all in this together. And when you rise, I rise. When I rise, you rise. But we're going to do it together. So what do you want to step into? What do you want to let rise up in you? Do you need more strength? Do you need to be a warrior, to be present? Are you called to be a healer? Because there's so much chaos and confusion and hurt around you. Are you called to be the one that heals? Are you called to be a visionary? Are you called to see things in a totally different way and then speak about them? And are you called to be the teacher? Because you're so willing to be the student. Whatever it is, let that rise up. And know that there's something even greater than that within you. The presence and the power and the love of God is seeking expression through everyone that will say, I'm in. And it doesn't matter if it's New Thought or Christian or Jewish. It doesn't matter if it's Muslim or Sufi or Hindu or Buddhist. It doesn't matter if they don't even know God. It doesn't matter. God just wants a willing heart because God's got great plans for its creation. Who's in?